Hello folks, hope you're good and well. I've tried to do another video now with you that is basically an overview of the contrasting views between two of the early church thinking and thinkers. When Augustine was writing, at that time there were some views and ideas that were quite popular or gaining popularity within Christianity, and Augustine didn't agree with them. He wanted basically to stamp them out, so then the church could have one universal way of thinking, which has run on to this day within the church. It's still focused on Augustine. Augustine was arguing against a man called Pelagius, and with a modern 21st century viewpoint, I think Pelagius's views are maybe a little bit more attractive than some of Augustine's views. But there are some negatives to Pelagius's views as well. It's not like let's all just agree with Pelagius. There are some ways in which some of his views may be critiqued and seen as the reason why Augustine needed to come up with and the theology that was there about the fall and human nature. In your table, in your booklet, there are key areas and ideas of which you've been asked to draw out the differences between these two theologians, and I'm hoping that you've had a go at it and you've tried to fill it in. And now this is a summary just to check whether you understand the difference between these two theologians and their teachings on all these different areas. So if you want to get your booklet back out again and check or add anything else that I say, then please do, and it'll hopefully help you with this area of debate between Augustine and Pelagius. You need to know this in your exam. When it comes to critiquing Augustine and in your analysis and evaluation into your essays, your key theologian to play against, in the same way how you would have like Aquinas versus Hume in the philosophy, you've got Augustine versus Pelagius in your theology. So please do know this debate and the depth and details of it to help you understand. So, taking each of these themes one at a time, I've tried to take notes basically using one of these booklets. It's a revision guide. You can get them up in the library. I recommend there's a few different revision guides that are good, or books. This is one that is helping us when we come to teaching. So, firstly, when it comes to human nature, I should maybe say this revision guide, OCR Religious Studies, Developments, Christian Thought, and it's by Chris Ear and Julian Waterfield. So, if you're interested, you can get them in the library. You could buy one yourself if you were that way inclined, but a lot of the booklets that you have cover the same material, so it's not a necessary thing to buy. It's just because I don't have all the resources here, I've used that to help me. Anyway, so start off with, we have human nature. When it comes to human nature, Augustine was arguing against Pelagius. Augustine was saying that basically we are all damaged by the fall, and I went through that in the last little video that I did a few minutes ago, talking about how basically due to the fall we focus too much now on cupiditas, not enough on caritas, and so therefore our human nature is flawed, and we're always going to try and do things that are wrong, things that are bad. Pelagius disagreed with Augustine. He said that if we're all damned and flawed, and we're always going to do things that are wrong, things that are immoral, things that are bad, then God would never have set commands and given us the Torah or given us the teachings through Christ. Because if we're always damned and we're never going to be able to do anything, then why give those commands? Why set a limit that's impossible to reach? It seems immoral, it seems wrong that God would ever do that. So Pelagius is arguing that effectively we have the ability to be perfect, we have the ability to be like God, but our free will always hold us back a little bit. It's not that it's impossible, It's just extremely unlikely that anyone's ever going to be perfect. That's Pelagius' view. Okay? So, that's when it comes to human nature. Augustine, we're damaged, we're fallen. Pelagius, we're not, but we ain't perfect. We can try and be perfect, we can try and do good, but it's just extremely unlikely you're ever going to be able to do it, and for God to expect perfection of us would make God cruel. So, second point, relating to sin. Augustine argued that we are incapable of avoiding sin because of the fall. Human nature is making us focus too much on cupiditas, and so ultimately we can't avoid it. It's always going to be there tempting us to do things that are bad, do things that are wrong. Pelagius, on the other hand, argued that we are capable of avoiding sin because sin is a choice. You choose whether to do something good or do something bad. It's your free will that makes you get that decision. Theoretically, we could live perfect lives, as I said before. If we follow all the Torah, if we follow all the teachings of Jesus, we could be perfect. But we have free will, so unfortunately we're not probably going to be perfect because we're going to choose right and wrong and stuff. But it's not that we're incapable of avoiding sin. You can avoid sin because you have free will and you choose ultimately what you're going to do. Do something good or do something bad. Next up is issues relating to guilt and original sin. Augustine argued that all of us are guilty. All of us are guilty of wrongdoing, of bad doing, because we were, here's our key phrase, we were seminally present in Adam and Eve when they sinned in the Garden of Eden. And now the whole of humanity is guilty for what they did, representing all of humanity. And we all now have original sin, which is transmitted through sexual intercourse from parent to sibling to sibling to sibling to sibling. The act of sex is dominated by lust, concordia. So therefore, we've all got it. We've all got original sin. We're all guilty. Pelagius had a different view of how we were created. And again, it stems back to everything in terms of our behaviour, whether it's good or bad, it just comes down to free will. And we were created, according to Augustine, as a human being, as not perfect and not sinful. We are just almost like John Locke with a blank slate, tabula rasa. And we're created like Adam and Eve were, without sin, without original sin. And over time, we use our free will to do good, use our free will to do bad, and then that makes us guilty of sin when we do bad things. So we're created blank, we build up our sin and make us guilty of the bad that we do. From Augustine, sin is within us all, and we're all damned from the get-go. And you need to be baptised to remove that original sin. You're still going to sin afterwards, because our nature is swayed in one way, but at least the baptism removes that original sin for you then to build on and try and be good even though you're never going to be able to. Next up, we have death. For Augustine, death was a consequence of the fall, and it was a punishment by God because of the fall. So, with it being a consequence and a punishment, theoretically, before the fall, maybe Adam and Eve could have lived forever, and death was brought about because of this fall. It was a punishment from God that we had to die. But Pelagius, he disagreed with this. Maybe makes God seem cruel and heartless to punish the whole of humanity in that way. So he saw instead that death is just basically a biological and logical necessity. We didn't have death and we kept multiplying as was instructed by God. We kept multiplying, kept populating the earth will be overpopulated. So we have to have a biological necessity of death, a biological need to die, as sad and as tragic as that may be. It's a part of nature. It's a part of the way the world works, so it's not over balanced. So that's Augustine's view, Pelagius' view, compared to it being a punishment. Next up is the nature of grace. For Augustine, we can perform good acts, but the way in which we perform good acts, because we are inherently bad, is because God grants us grace in order to be able to do it. Grace is basically God's favour, God's love, God's trust, God's energy, God's spirit. That's kind of a very vague understanding of grace. It's very vague anyway. A whole PhD paper could be written on what is grace. Right? So God grants you His grace, and because you've received God's grace, you can then do good things. Because otherwise, because we're damaged, we can't do good. We're always swayed to always do bad. We need God's grace in order for us to choose to do the good thing. Or Pelagius, he accepts that God's grace does help support human beings, but it's kind of like a guide, if you like. God grants you grace in order to support what you should do. You still have free will, and the free will could mean that you turn away from God's grace and think, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do this instead. So Pelagius could be seen as downplaying the importance of grace in terms of decision making, because ultimately his focus is free will, and the choices that you make. You see all the way through this side, third board, it all comes down to choice, free will, over and over again. So that's what grace is. Augustine focuses massively on grace. Pelagius not so. Next one is salvation. The word salvation basically means saving. So when you receive salvation, you're saved to then go to heaven. That's what the term is roughly about, if you've never heard the term before in this booklet. So for Augustine, no one deserves salvation because, as I already said, we're all damned and damaged by the fall. No one deserves it. So this is where God's grace has to step in to save us. And God's grace is free and unmerited. You cannot earn God's grace. God's grace is freely given to you. So whatever merit you try and do, whatever merit you try and build up, no matter how you try to be a multi-millionaire, you try and get fame, fortune, or even you try and do good deeds to help other people and keep doing good all the time, you can't earn God's grace. He's not going to say, you're good, so I'll help you. It doesn't work like that. God freely chooses an unmerited gift of grace, and He chooses who to give it to. And we don't know who those people are. We'll know if we manage to get into heaven and see them there afterwards. But it's all down to God. We can't earn it. We can't say one person's better than another person and they deserve heaven. One person can't say about themselves, I've been a really good person, an amazing person, a great person, so therefore I deserve to go to heaven. No. It's only God that gets to choose, not you, or any decision that you try and make. So it's free, it's unmerited, and God chooses who to give it to in order to grant that salvation. For Pelagius, he disagreed. He said that basically life, again, is all down to free will and choice. And what you have to do is choose salvation by choosing to do good things. You build up good deeds like earning brownie points, and then the more points you get, the more deeds you get, then therefore you'll get more rewards in heaven. That's Pelagius' view that he kind of went with, which I think with a lot of 20th century thinking, people probably like to go along with that view. I've been really good, so I deserve reward. Again, is that human beings getting above themselves, thinking that they're great and amazing in some way? Maybe human beings need to be kept in check a little bit of modesty, humility is a good thing. What makes you think you deserve something that's that good? Yeah, so I don't know. I'm swayed with that one in terms of which side of the tree I would fall on, because I think both of them have positives behind it. The issue with this one is if you can't earn goodness, then what's the point in being good? You're damned anyway, so what's the point in even trying to be good if you can't earn anything? Whereas with this one, people are righteous, and as soon as you start to think I'm doing this in order to achieve heaven, then surely that's no longer a good act. A little bit like Kantian ethics. If I do this, I'm a good person. No, you do it because you should do it, not because you want to be achieving salvation. As soon as you do this in the hope to get to heaven, then that doesn't make you a good person. That makes you a selfish person, arguably. So, dare I say, I'm possibly convinced myself that I'm on this side of the board rather than that side for the salvation point. But you're happy to disagree with me. Feel free. Just back up whatever argument you're going to say as to why I'm wrong. But I think I'm probably over here rather than over there. Yeah. There you go. Anyway, next up. Suffering. For Augustine, all suffering is deserved. You deserved it because you were suddenly present in Adam and Eve. So anything that any human being does wrong or gets wrong or is suffering for, that's all our own fault. Because we deserve it, because we were suddenly present. We have that original sin within us. It's a punishment, it's a consequence of the fall. Yeah, there you go. For Pelagius, he would disagree with that. He would argue that God acting in such a way would make God cruel, and he doesn't want to go anywhere near the possibility of God being seen as cruel. Instead, suffering is due to free will. I choose to do that, which is the same as Augustine in a way. I choose to do that. It's my free choice, and so that's why people suffer. The difficulty with this one, though, which maybe puts me more in terms of this line of thought instead of that one, is when you think of the innocence of children. Say a child gets very, very sick, maybe a newborn baby is innocent, arguably, very innocent, gets very sick early on and may well lose their life. Would I say that they deserved it because of original sin? For me, that seems cruel, harsh, and I don't really. It's unsettling for me. It doesn't mean that just because it seems cruel that that's wrong. It might well be that Augustine's right. I don't know, but for me, that does make God seem cruel. He would punish an innocent. He would allow the punishment of an innocent child due to original sin. No, I think it's just that's nature. That's the price of freedom, and these bad things are going to happen. So I think I'm in the Pelagius camp on that one. I think showing that in some ways I'm Augustinian and in other ways Pelagius maybe shows that maybe there isn't one right answer to any of this. Maybe in your essays you can be even pointing to Augustine's views on this is correct, but Pelagius' view would argue is correct because of this reason here, but Augustine correct for that reason there. As long as you're backing up the reasons, you could say that both theologians have aspects of their work that you agree with, or both of them have aspects of their work that you disagree with. The important thing is evaluate and back up why you agree with it or why you disagree with it. What's the evidence either way to support or reject it? That's the important thing. It's not what the answer is, it's how you get to that answer that the examiner wants to see. Anyway, back to the chart. Next one. Relating to God. Augustine shows or believes that God shows his love through grace. God intervenes in the damning destiny of humanity by becoming Jesus, and then, or being Jesus, and then saving us for the sins that we're inevitably going to be making. God is not to blame for any of the suffering that happened. It's all down to our free will and how suffering is actually a privation of good. When we use our free will to not do good things, that's when badness comes in. So God's not to blame, according to Augustine. It's our fault because of the fall. It's our fault because we choose to do bad things that makes us inevitably damned. But God is loving, God cares, and God will save, and He'll save everyone. So, God will save those that God wants to save. God may not necessarily save everyone. That's not an Augustinian teaching, that's a John Hick thing. Ignore what I just said then. So, God will choose who to save, and we don't know who or how many, particularly, according to Augustine. Other people disagree with that. And God shows His love through grace. Yeah, so just fact check myself on that one. God, in terms of Pelagius, Pelagius would argue for Augustine it would be wrong for God to condemn human beings for things that they cannot help. And I suppose that's fair. Why would God punish someone because it was something that they were programmed to do? If human being, because of the fall, is in a way programmed to be damned and be bad and always focus on negative things, then it's unjust for God to condemn people for that, because we're going to inevitably do bad things. But what God might do is reward people who are always trying to do good. So again, it comes back to free will. God loves, God rewards, God grants salvation to those that deserve it. They just have a drink. Product placement. Finally, we have Augustine and Pelagius and their views and ideas and teachings about Jesus. Um, so, for Augustine, Jesus is an expression of God's grace, but because the only way to rebuild the relationship between humanity and God that was damaged in the fall was by a human being living a perfect life. A human being can't live a perfect life because they're damned. Only God can be perfect. So Jesus needs to be both God and human, 100% of both, in order to express God's loving grace to save those that God wants to save, those that are elected. So Jesus is an expression of God's love to the world through His sacrifice on the cross. Massive areas of soteriology there that if you looked at theology at university you'd be delving into. For Pelagius, on the other hand, with Augustine, there's a Oregon. For Pelagius, he would argue that good people existed before Jesus did. Just to say a few prophets, you would have like Moses, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Isaiah, and Elijah, and they're just within Judaism. That's not looking at the rest of the world. So Pelagius would argue that good people did exist before Jesus, and surely God would have wanted to help those people and save those people when they died. So it wouldn't be that everyone was damned and then suddenly Jesus comes along and now some people can be saved. Surely God's love and God's work was always there at work, helping and rewarding people. So instead of Jesus expressing God's grace in terms of being that sacrifice that saved and redeemed the world, which is very much Christian thought and thinking, for Pelagius, Jesus is very much a guide on how to live. If you want to know what choices to make in terms of the free will that you have. Where's free will gone? In terms of the free will, what choices to make in order to be a good person and receive that reward from God of achieving heaven? Well, follow Jesus, and he'll show you the ways to behave and how to act, and effectively do the most loving thing that there is to do in terms of caritas, in terms of agape. So that's where Jesus comes in, Pelagius. He's a guide on how to live, effectively. God showing this is how I want you to behave. The two, I think, Augustine and Pelagius, for me, I think there's positives that both of them have, and there are negatives that both of them have. 21st century thinking is probably skewing people, and the more you look into it, you may want to look at Pelagius and think that his head is one that you agree with a little bit more. Possibly because if you're going to be a boring student and just saying Genesis was just a myth, I don't mean put that in your essays, but try and build on that, because it's a boring answer that every student in the country is going to say. So you may be inclined to go with Pelagius. But again, I don't think Pelagius is perfect. So one way in which you could see him as being negative is that effectively, surely we're all, in some way, shape or form, equal in the eyes of God. And the actions that we perform shouldn't grant favour from one person to another to say that you're better than you and you get a reward whereas you shouldn't. None of us are indeed perfect, and if heaven is a place of perfection, if none of us are ever perfect and none of us can ever attain that within this world, in this life, then how can we ever get to heaven if heaven is a place of perfection? Surely the only answer for that is through God's grace, isn't it? That he would elect those to join him. Yeah, if we're all kind of equal, it's kind of, to use a little analogy that I'm just going to come up with. Imagine a parent has to choose between two kids. One of them's well behaved, one of them's naughty. I'm pretty sure if it was you and your siblings and you asked your parents, which one of us do you love more in terms of the two of you, or three of you, or five of you, or how many there are, I'm hoping your parents would probably say something like, I love you all equally. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's great that you're always well behaved, and it's bad that they're always naughty, but I love you both equally. So if that's true of a parent to a child, how much truer must it be for God, looking at the whole of humanity? I'm not saying that I love you more because you deserve rewards. Can you earn God's love? Do you earn your parents' love? I don't know. You'd have to ask a parent, and I'm not one. That's my parents, but I know they just give me the answer which they love me and my sister equally. So there you go. Maybe Augustine's onto something there. Maybe my analogy kind of helps with some sort of thought. But you may find aspects of this board going back and forwards. You agree with some parts and some parts you disagree with, if you put yourself into a Christian mindset. I don't know what my next video might be. I'll try and do one in the future again to help you out. Hope you're all good and well. Stay safe, stay home, take care of yourselves and each other. All the best, folks.